Kia ora and good afternoon everyone. I'm joined by the new Minister for Rail, Winston Peters, to update you on the steps the Government is taking to ensure New Zealand has a safe, reliable and commercially viable ferry service. Let me start by congratulating Mr Peters on his appointment. I'm delighted to have his wisdom and experience brought to bear on this project. I've enjoyed working with you on the way forward for this project over the recent months. As you know, this time last year, Cabinet declined a KiwiRail request to contribute almost an additional $1.5 billion to its project to replace the Interislander ferry fleet. This was because of the blowout in the cost of the project due to the landside costs associated with servicing the larger vessels KiwiRail had contracted to buy. Between 2018 and the end of last year, the total cost of the project, including associated landside infrastructure, quadrupled from $775 million to more than $3 billion. And given the project's track record, ministers did not have confidence there would not be further blowouts. In fact, advice provided to the previous government was that, based on international benchmarking, the cost of the project could approach $4 billion. Following the government's decision to decline additional funding, KiwiRail cancelled its contract to buy the new vessels, and since then the government has taken advice from a ministerial advisory group, officials and multiple stakeholders, and we have taken soundings in the shipbuilding market. Today, we are announcing that the government is establishing a new company within a value for money envelope to procure 2 new ferries. This decision will ensure New Zealand has a safe, reliable and resilient service to move people and freight between the North and South Islands. The expected cost of the project is commercially confidential until procurement and negotiations for the associated landside infrastructure have been completed. However, a funding envelope has been established by Cabinet, and the costs are expected to be much less than would have been the case with Project IREX, even once break fees are included. It is important to note that the cost of the associated landside cannot be divorced from the cost of buying the ferries. There is no point in buying a new car if you've got nowhere to park it. And like it or not, paying for parking is part of the deal. In recent days, some have naively suggested that all that should be considered is the cost of the ships, with no attention paid to the cost of supporting infrastructure to berth them. So to that naive suggestion, I'd simply ask, how do people think passengers and freight were going to disembark the mega ferries? Rail-enabled rafts, perhaps? Project costs must be considered in their totality, lest $4 billion mistakes are repeated. The new company established to procure the ferries will be a limited liability company listed in Schedule 4A of the Public Finance Act 1989. The shareholding ministers of the company will be the Minister for Rail and the Ministers of Finance and Transport. The company will have 2 roles. The first will be to undertake the procurement process for new ferries and to report back to ministers for final decisions. The second will be to support officials to work with ports, KiwiRail and other stakeholders to ensure landside development planning is sufficiently advanced for Cabinet to make final decisions on ferry procurement with confidence. And those processes are expected to conclude in March. One of the government's aims is to leverage existing infrastructure to the maximum extent possible. The exact costs of the landside developments won't be known until the project is finalised, but we are confident, based on our work to date, that they can be delivered for significantly less than for Project IREX. This is partly because the ferries will be smaller, but also because the ports will not be gold-plated. To ensure the best possible solution is arrived at, the private sector is being invited to put forward alternative proposals for a ferry service during the first stage of the procurement process up till March. Any alternative proposals received will be assessed, along with the results of the first stage of the procurement process in March, after which final decisions on next steps will be taken. Whatever the preferred solution, rail freight will continue to be able to be transported between the North and South Islands. I'm now going to hand over to Mr Peters to talk about next steps.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Minister. The reality is that this will be my second chance to be in charge of New Zealand Rail, and we intend to hit the ground running, and we intend to find out every aspect of ongoing work that's required before we rush off and make any premature comments. So thank you very much.
What have you been doing for a year if today you're only announcing that you've just established a company to work through the next steps?
We've had a ministerial advisory group looking at what the options are for procuring ships internationally and to advise us on what would be a viable ferry service into the future. That process concluded in June and they recommended to us the establishment of a Schedule 4 entity. They recommended that medium-sized vessels would be suitable and that we could deliver both those and the associated portside infrastructure costs within a much smaller funding envelope than was required for Project IREX. Subsequent to that, we have been working both with the ports and other stakeholders to ensure that we have a viable proposition on the table. That viable proposition is there. We are ready to procure in March. What we are also allowing ourselves to do is to ensure that we are exploring all other options up till March to get the best value for money and the best sustainable solution for New Zealand taxpayers.
Is there some chance of the ferries that are procured being roll-on, roll-off rail?
Yes.
And the Schedule 4A company, will that only be used to procure and investigate the landside infrastructure, or will it be used to eventually run the ferries, taking that operation of Interislander off Kiwi Rail?
Our operating assumption is that Kiwi Rail would run the ferries. The purpose of the entity is to procure the ferries and conduct port negotiation, and we have entered this exercise in the understanding that Kiwi Rail would in the first instance run the ships. But as I say, we are open to exploring a range of options.
Will you actually ever let us...
Just following Jenna's question, does that mean if roll-on, roll-off is an option, then bridging is also still an option?
I'd point out to you that 4 of 5 ferries that currently cross the strait are roll-on, roll-off. And we have been assured, both by our experts and Kiwi Rail itself, that vessels of that sort are completely compatible with a rail freight service.
That doesn't actually answer my question, does it? So are you saying that having both new ferries, there's still an option that both of them would be bridging ferries, not roll-on, roll-off?
Yes.
How do you think that the rail network is going to respond to that, given the many comments that we've heard as early as this morning, that basically that could ruin rail if you don't have a service connecting the North and the South Island? It could see the end of Picton Kaikoura's line, for example, and not to mention the fact that it's highly inefficient.
Well, I would invite you to put those questions to Kiwi Rail, who have themselves conducted an economic efficiency analysis which has concluded that rail freight services could be completely compatible with the kinds of ferries that I have described. In fact, I understand that the assessment that they have been delivered demonstrates that that would be both commercially viable and would support their rail freight service. So I invite you to put those questions to Kiwi Rail.
Given how many issues we've had with the Interislander ferries of late, can you assure the public that there is another 3 years of a decent ferry service left in those?
Yes, one of the important steps that has been conducted in recent months is Kiwi Rail commissioning expert international advice from DNV, who are ship experts. That advice is on the public record, and what it shows is that the current ships can be maintained to be economically viable until at least 2029, and that they can be safely maintained until then. We have taken pains to make clear to Kiwi Rail we expect safety of the current vessels to be a priority. and they have assured us that they can conduct the maintenance schedule required to deliver that. It's important to note that one of the reasons we are using a Schedule 4 entity for procurement and negotiation is that we want KiwiRail completely focused on operating its current service as well as New Zealanders have a right to expect.
John Hart promised 2029 when you haven't actually procured anything?
Yes, based on the soundings that we have received to date, we can both procure ships within shipbuilding windows that exist internationally. We've had those market testings, and we can have them delivered by 2029.
South Korea about that? Is that who you have had assurances from?
Our experts have engaged with a range of shipyards around the world. We are not pre-selecting which shipyard will build those, but we have taken enough soundings to be assured that there are both slots for the building of ferries, that they would be deliverable on time, and we're not excluding any shipyards at this point from the ability to tender for those ships, and obviously that could include HMV.
You've put $4 million equity into the new company. And you said the total envelope is expected to be less than IREX. What is that total envelope?
Well, I'm not going to disclose that figure. The advice that we have received is that if we disclose that commercially sensitive figure, we are inviting those who are tendering for this work to climb to that number. We've set a maximum envelope and we intend to stick to it.
So when can we expect to find out what it all looks like, how much it's going to cost, all that sort of thing?
Once procurement decisions are complete.
And what's your general time frame on that? I mean, you must have a period in mind. 6
As
months,
I say,
12 months?
Cabinet has directed that procurement will commence in March.
Break fee, can you just tell us, I mean, obviously, is that still subject to commercial sensitivity at the moment in terms of you can't reveal that? Will you ever reveal how much that was?
Yes, I will. The reason I won't reveal that now is that negotiations are still underway to determine what that figure is, and we do expect that those negotiations will reach a conclusion next year.
Can you give us a bit of a ballpark? I mean, taxpayers deserve to know that, don't they?
That would be unwise. My job is to protect the taxpayer, and I don't protect the taxpayer if I give the other side of the negotiating table a figure to aim for.
Just one thing. Transparency is when you tell the public the truth, what you actually spent to acquire 2 new ferries or other work you're doing on railways. That's what transparency is. It's not going out there and wobbling away and guessing before you even know what the facts are, or worse still, act in the most uncommercial way where the market is being set by your stupidity.
Are you satisfied?
Yes.
Mr. Peters, you and your party have had a long-standing commitment to rail. Your supporters are very strong backers of rail. Are you going to be able to look them in the eye and reassure them that this inter-island ferry service is going to continue to carry trains?
Can I just say this? Look, this is not our first time at this job. You recall that the workshops in Dunedin were saved by us. You'll recall that 17 tunnels were lowered all the way from Auckland to Whangarei, and a whole lot of more work is on the project as well, because this is about being the Minister for Rail, where there are questions of the ferries, and they're going to be addressed in a comprehensive way, looking at every possible option that is in, A, the cargo movement and people movement concerns of New Zealanders, and second, our economy, and the third, being a responsible government.
I think New Zealanders can be assured, for so long as Minister Winston Peters is the Minister for Rail, the trains are in good hands.
People are saying that all of the work that you did for Hillside, for example, will go to waste if the carriages can't go on the new ferries because you can't get carriages down.
Well, I'm glad you're talking about Hillside, because when we saved it, you gave the credit to Labour. So get it right this time, would you?
Can you just answer the question? Will Hillside be rendered useless if you don't have ferries that can carry carriages?
Look, it makes sense for us to use as much of our present utilities around this country, including in Wellington, to keep the money in our own economy and do what we used to do, beginning with Bogle when he built in 10 years, between 1870 and 1880, more rail than the next 130 years. That's what we're capable of doing. I'm going to do it again.
You mentioned Labour there. Mr. Peters, you were the minister who set up IREX. They will argue that you underestimated
Excuse me,
the cost.
no, fault again. They were commissioned to go and find 2 ferries for $400.1 million. Look what happened. They blew it out to $3.2 billion, of which 80% had nothing to do with the ferries at all. Now, that squanderous behaviour also is threatened by our latest forecast to take the cost to possibly $4 billion. That's how bad they were, and we have resolved from that. and we're going to fix it up.
They will argue that you underestimated the cost of the landside.
Well, they can argue anything they like, but if I'm coming with expertise on this matter of having delivered, when what we had here was the most irresponsible. By 2021, this whole project had gone haywire.
Nicola Willis, have you set any lines? Just to be clear on 2 points, so you're not looking at buying second-hand ferries anymore at all? It'd definitely be building new ferries?
No, we actively explored that option. More than 21 owners of current ships that were deemed to be suitable were contacted, and they weren't for sale. As I've said, guiding criteria for us have been that we want ferries that are safe, reliable, economically efficient to run, and that are fully compatible with our rail service, and we were not able at this juncture to find any second-hand ferries that would meet that purpose. As I say, we now have until March for other options to present themselves if they are available, but what I can do today is look at all of you and commit that no matter what, we will be procuring 2 ferries that will ensure a safe and reliable ferry service. We will be doing that for less than the cost of Project IREX, and you will get the best option.
What criteria will you look at? Because you say you're looking for private sector engagement. So are you suggesting if they came up with a better proposal, cheaper proposal, the government would go with that? And if that were the case, what would that then mean for Kiwi Rail if there was a private sector operator running the ferries?
Look, what we're going to do is look at every possible variable in this matter and then make a decision when we've got all the facts in, and so we're not ruling anything out or in at this point in time. It would be grossly unwise to.
Minister, do you have confidence in the Kiwi Rail board and its leadership team?
If you're asking me,
For rail, please.
I'll give you an answer when I've had a chance to talk to them and ask them why we got into the mess we got into now. Everybody has a chance to put their own case first, and it'd be wrong for me to judge them in front of you without having spoken to them first. I want to speak to them, I want to speak to the union, I want to speak to everybody who's concerned about this industry.
Would you return Greg Miller to the board? It was I think you appointed.
Well, again, see, I've just said at the beginning, I do not intend to answer any premature questions today whether I haven't done the work that would substantiate me answering the question.
Are you open to reappointing Mr. Miller?
Son?
Well, you're open to reappointing Mr. Miller, who was the one you appointed who oversaw.
I just said to you, I'm not making any decisions at this point in time. I just got the job 5 minutes ago. If you don't mind.
Minister
you
Willis,
promised that we would see Toyota ferries rather than Ferraris. Are these new ferries that you're going to procure going to be Toyotas?
That's right. These will be reliable ships that are appropriate to our means. And you know, when the last lot bought the Ferraris, they forgot you need a garage and a car park space. We haven't forgotten those important facts.
New Zealanders an idea of what ferries were to be.
Hang on, over here.
If the ferries were to not be rail enabled, would that be a coalition breaker as far as New Zealand First is concerned?
Yeah, no, we don't go into these arrangements taking these responsibilities, intending to lose, all right?
So you
So
are
the
going
ferry
in
will
with
be
with-
rail enabled then, Mr.
We're going to go and look at every aspect of this thing and in a very short time be able to tell you this is what our plans are, this is the time frame that can be built, this is what's going to cost. Now, even on the question of being asked what they're going to cost, to give that away would be, commercially silly.
But your preference is for rail enabled ferries, is that correct?
We're looking at all the options, as I said, going forward.
Will you agree to not having rail enabled ferries, Mr. Peters?
Say?
Will you, Winston Peters, agree to buy ferries that are not...
Well, actually, look, I've been reading your articles and also watching on TV all your forecast. Who's your lead? Because that person needs to be admonished. He's got it all wrong, hasn't he?
Minister Willis, 2 ferries going to be enough at
You're
the
the
moment.
Minister for Rail, you're setting up a 4A company. You won't confirm the 900 million. What's wrong?
Well, I won't confirm the 900 million because it's dribble, that's why.
Is 2 ferries going to be
Well,
enough at the moment? At the moment, we have 3. If one got taken out for servicing,
Well, you've got the other ferries going across there as well, other people applying the Cook Strait as well, because we are committed to finding 2 ferries for Kiwi Rail.
Will you release the ministerial that advisory report? Are you planning on releasing that now?
Yeah, look, in due course, yes, we will.
Listen, there might be a number of people that are watching today's press conference quite disappointed in the fact that you set up a company, all well and good, but haven't come with something more tangible, such as an announcement of how much you're spending on ferries and when they're coming. What would be your message to people at home disappointed in what you've announced today?
I've delivered. I've discharged my duty to the New Zealand people, which is that I said to them, you were landed with an absolute dog of a project, and a new government is going to clean it up. And we are going to ensure you get safe, reliable ferry services that respect your money. We've done that. We have a proposition that means in March the government has committed funds to procure new ferries that will provide safe and reliable ferry crossings into the future, and we can do that more responsibly financially than the last lot. What we've also said is that we will do the right thing and ensure that over these next couple of months we absolutely run to ground whether there is an even better option than the case we are presenting.
Just like the Little River Band, tell them to hang on, help's on its way.
Why has it taken so long? You received the advice from the Ministerial Advisor months ago. You've got to make a decision again in March. Why has it taken so long for you to move from the advice from the advisory group to making this announcement today?
More haste, less speed.
What have you been doing in the months in between receiving that advice from the advisory group and making a decision to then make another decision in March?
Making sure that we have fully explored the implications of the decisions that Cabinet has made, making sure we don't repeat the mistakes of the last government who ran blindly into one cost blowout after the other without ever pausing to say, are we on the right track? We're getting it back on track.
Just looking from the outside, that the reason for that delay has been a massive blow-up inside the coalition over what you want to do. Can you absolutely rule out that the reason
that's not true.
Does this look like a blow-up? This isn't a blow-up.
It's just been months of silence since you received that advice, and today you emerge here, having made up and promising a decision sometime in the future. It looks like there's been some serious wrangling that's been going on behind the scenes for months.
No, look, this is just a good news week.
Look, we have worked collaboratively behind the scenes. It is fair to say that of the three partners in the coalition, there were some who started with divergent views. There were some who didn't think an investment in ferries was necessary at all. The decision that Cabinet has reached is that that investment is necessary, it will happen, and we will deliver safe, reliable ferry services into the future.
Why do you want to be Minister for Rail?
Pardon?
Why do you want to be Minister for Rail?
Because I asked for the job in 2017 when it was seriously run down, and I seriously enjoyed turning that around dramatically. And we were very proud of what we did, and we were on the way to seriously getting a modern railway system in this country. But unfortunately, I was no longer elected into Parliament. So here we are, 4 years later, got the chance to do it all over again, and we will hit the ground running, I can assure you. We've got a whole lot of sources and a whole lot of international contacts to make, and we'll get these answers with all the speed that's required.
Can I please ask you Mr Harmon's question again? Would you consider it a breach of the coalition agreement if the new ferries were not rail enabled?
Well, see, we don't answer questions like that, because they're not designed to get the facts out. They're designed to try and have a got-you moment. And I'm long past getting caught by got-you moments, all right?
Can I just ask you about the
implications for the implications for the regional councils and the port operators? How do you anticipate it working? Are they going to take on more of the cost?
Look, there's already been engagement with Port of Marlborough and Centreport, and we have conveyed our expectation that they meet as many of the costs as possible, and we have been going through an exercise to understand what the minimal viable proposition and cost is, and that has given us confidence that we will be able to meet those costs. The port, as the owner of the assets, should be, forgive me, the first port of call for the funding.
And in terms of, they had some sort of arrangement with Blue Connections, they wanted to form some sort of alliance project. Are you disregarding that effectively?
Look, we have explored the concept of multi-user terminals, which was a proposition that was put on the table. At this stage, Blue Bridge has not expressed interest in that at the Picton end, and that is still an option that could exist further down the track. But our focus right now is on making sure we have the infrastructure up and ready for new ships, and we don't want to delay, complicate or add cost to that by trying to negotiate a bigger than Ben-Hur solution.
Willis, can I just ask
given you're not disclosing the funding envelope and you can't predict the global economy for the next 3 years, are we just meant to take your promise that it will definitely end up being cheaper than $3 billion? Because can you actually promise that 3 years out?
Yes, because two things have happened. The first is Cabinet have allocated that funding, and it will come out of the allowances in next year's budget. So that money is committed. The second reason is, through the extensive due diligence we have done in recent months, we have been able to form a very clear view of what the maximum costs for this project would be. The funding envelope we have set allows for those maximum costs. It's my goal and the goal of Cabinet that we come in well under that number.
But you can only set maximum costs on today's environment, and you haven't procured anything, and you haven't signed a contract for anything. So you're taking a gamble that by the time you say they'll be delivered in 2029, nothing will have happened that might have pushed those costs out, aren't you?
Look, the extreme that we were facing was possibly $4 billion. Now, with the greatest respect, if we can't do massively, far better than that, I wouldn't take the job on in the first place.
Is anything I just said there incorrect? I mean,
Yes,
you
it
all of
is.
it.
Let me correct you. Let me correct you, because actually what we've done is soundings with shipyards, and we've ascertained at what cost, if they were to build ships for the 2029 window, they think they could do that. And that number, we've formed soundings across a number of shipbuilders we have in mind. When shipyards are giving you numbers, they are always thinking in advance. And the advice that we've received is that there are slots available within the funding envelope that we have presented. These are long-run projects. These are things where you actually have to make steps that prepare you for, yes, what is a multi-year project. And as the Minister for Rail says, the last government didn't think that way. They went far too quick. They didn't think it through, and that's how we ended up with a $4 billion mess to clean up.
Last question. Hang on, one last question.
Can I just be completely clear
No,
about...
you've had 7 questions. Over here.
Can you give us a sense of the proportion of the cost, though, of the port infrastructure, given you're not getting those big ferries? Is that halving?
The ratio will dramatically change from what it was. It was 80 to 20, which was what we inherited. The ratio will be far more rational, far more reasonable, and far more economic than that.
And will the
Got
fee
either a
cost be
design or
included in...
costings for either of the port structures, the new port.
Yeah, but between the real world, we know what it's cost somebody else at some other place. So we should be able to get us inside those zones, can't we?
Can you guarantee that freight costs won't increase because of the way that you've designed this plan?
It is actually up to ferry operators to determine freight costs, and again, that's a question best put to Kiwi Rail.
Well, if you make the
And one last thing though, it is potentially that freight costs will actually reduce. But you'll hear about that later on. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.